Life is not a series of accidents. It is not a chaotic storm where people drift in and out without reason. No, life is a symphony, and God Himself is the master conductor. Every note, every rest, every movement has its purpose. And in His wisdom, He knows when a certain melody must fade so that another can rise. There are people who enter our lives like a beautiful chord, resonating with us for a time. They bring joy, laughter, companionship, and then there are those who disrupt the harmony, whose presence brings more noise than music, yet we hold on to them. We try to force relationships to last beyond their season. We cling to friendships, partnerships, and even burdens that God is gently trying to remove. But hear me when I say this: God sees what we cannot. He knows the motives of the heart, the unseen currents of the soul. And in His perfect orchestration, He removes the people who do not belong in the next movement of our journey. It may feel like a loss. It may feel like rejection, but it is in truth divine protection. Think about it. Have you ever looked back and realized that some of the people you once mourned were never meant to stay, that if they had remained, they would have hindered your growth? That their influence, their words, their ways were not in alignment with God's purpose for your life. We don't always recognize it in the moment. When someone walks away, when a friendship fades, when the doors close, our first instinct is to ask why. We wrestle with disappointment. We wonder what we did wrong. But what if the absence of that person is not a curse, but a blessing? What if their departure is the very thing making space for what is coming next? When God removes the wrong people, He is not punishing you. He is refining your circle so that you can walk in the fullness of what He has called you to do. He is removing distractions, removing voices that would have led you astray. And sometimes He removes people simply because their season in your life has ended. Imagine a great orchestra. If every musician played without listening to the conductor, the result would be chaos. Some instruments must play for a time and then fall silent. Others must enter in the right moment. A violin that plays too long begins to drown out the cellos. A drum that refuses to rest disrupts the balance of the piece. And so it is with life. God is shaping something beautiful with your days, something grander than you can see from where you stand. But He must remove the notes that no longer fit the song He is composing in you. So when someone walks away, when a friendship dissolves, when a door closes, trust the conductor. Do not chase after people God is trying to release. Do not mourn what He is removing. Instead, lift your eyes. Listen for the next note. Watch as He brings the right people at the right time to create a harmony more beautiful than you ever imagined. Because the music is not ending, it is only shifting. And the hands that hold the baton, they do not make mistakes. When relationships we thought would last forever begin to fray, when the people we once leaned on suddenly grow distant and we ask ourselves why, it is a painful thing to watch someone walk away. It is unsettling to feel the unraveling of what we once held together so tightly. But what if I told you that some endings are not tragedies? What if I told you that some separations are not the breaking of something precious, but the clearing away of what no longer belongs? God is not only the giver of good things, He is also the remover of the unnecessary. He does not just open doors, He closes them. He does not just bring people into our lives, He takes some away. And if we trust Him when He gives, we must trust Him when He takes. Some people are placed in our lives for a season. They come with a purpose to teach us, to challenge us, to walk with us for a time. But just as the tide comes in and then recedes, so too must certain relationships. Not because they are evil, not because they were never meant to be, but simply because their role in our story has been fulfilled. But we fight it, don't we? We hold on to friendships that have run their course. We chase after relationships that have already faded. We try to keep alive what God is trying to release, and in doing so, we resist His hand. You see, we often think of separation as a loss, but God sees it as alignment. He sees the bigger picture, the road ahead that we cannot yet see. There are people who may have been good for where you were, but are not meant for where you are going. Their influence, their mindset, their desires, these things may not be in harmony with what God is doing in you. And so in His wisdom, He begins to unravel what we have woven, not to hurt us, but to heal us, not to take away our joy, but to make room for a deeper joy. Think of a tree in the autumn. The leaves that were once vibrant, full of life, begin to fall. The branches grow bare. And if you didn't know better, you might think the tree was dying. But something is happening beneath the surface. The tree is not dying, it is preparing for something new, shedding what is no longer needed so that in due time new life can emerge. Some people are like those leaves. They were beautiful for a time, but their presence is no longer meant to remain. If we hold on too tightly, we resist the growth God is preparing in us. And let me tell you something. When God removes the wrong people, He is making space for the right ones. He is preparing your heart for the relationships that will nourish your soul, for the voices that will speak life into your journey. So, don't fight the unraveling. Don't mourn too long over what is slipping away. Instead, lift your eyes and trust the hands that are shaping your path. Because what feels like an ending is often the beginning of something greater. Silence has a way of making us uncomfortable. When someone leaves, when a friendship fades, when the voices that once surrounded us grow quiet, we start to wonder what went wrong. We replay conversations, second-guess decisions, and wrestle with the emptiness left behind. But have you ever considered that silence itself can be a voice? That absence can be its own kind of teacher? There are moments in life when God doesn't just remove people, He removes their presence, their influence, their words. And in the space they leave behind, He speaks. But too often we are so focused on what is missing that we fail to hear what He is saying. Sometimes the absence of a person teaches us more than their presence ever could. When they were there, their voice may have drowned out the still, small whisper of God. Their opinions may have shaped our decisions more than we realized. Their influence may have kept us tethered to a place we were never meant to stay. And so when they are gone, we feel the emptiness. But that emptiness is an invitation to listen, an invitation to grow. Think about a night sky. When the sun is shining, we don't see the stars. They are there, burning brightly, but hidden by the light of day. It is only when the sky turns dark that the stars appear, when the silence of night reveals the beauty that was always there. The same is true in our lives. Some people are like the brightness of day, always speaking, always filling the space. And while their presence may be good for a time, it may also be keeping us from seeing what God wants to reveal. So He allows the night to come. He allows the silence to settle in, not to leave us empty, but to help us see the light that was hidden all along. But we don't like the silence, do we? We rush to fill it. We try to rekindle relationships that God has already ended. We reach out, hoping to bring back what was lost, instead of leaning into what God is doing. But if we are always chasing voices that have left, how can we ever hear the one who has stayed? God does not remove people without purpose. He does not allow distance without reason. And when the wrong people leave, when the noise fades, when all that is left is the stillness, that is often where His voice is clearest. So do not fear the silence. Do not grieve what has gone. Instead, lean into the quiet and listen, because in that silence, God is speaking. Pain has a way of making us question everything. When people leave, when relationships fall apart, when the ones we trusted turn away, it wounds us. We ask God, why? Why did you allow this? Why did you take them from my life? We feel the sting of loss, the weight of disappointment, and we wonder if we will ever heal. But hear me, God is not punishing you. He is refining you. He is stripping away what cannot remain so that you can step into what He has prepared. And though it may hurt, though it may feel like something is being torn from you, it is not destruction, It is transformation. Think of gold being purified. Gold does not begin in its purest form. It is found in the earth mixed with other elements containing impurities that weaken its value. And so it is placed in the fire. The heat rises, the flames consume, but the fire does not destroy, it purifies. It burns away what does not belong, leaving only what is strong, only what is true, only what is valuable. And that is what God does in our lives. When the wrong people leave, when we walk through seasons of loss, it feels like we are being burned. But in reality, we are being refined. The pain you feel is not pointless. It is producing something in you. It is shaping you, strengthening you, teaching you. It is drawing you closer to God, teaching you to rely not on people, but on Him. Look back over your life. Think of the moments that hurt the most, the betrayals, the disappointments, the relationships that ended without explanation, and now ask yourself, did you not grow from those moments? Did they not push you toward something greater? Did they not reveal who truly belonged in your life and who never did? Sometimes we do not realize how much someone was holding us back until they are gone. We do not see the weight we were carrying until it is lifted. And though the lifting may feel like loss, it is actually freedom. But we resist it. We cling to what is familiar, even if it is no longer good for us. We hold on to people God is trying to remove because we fear the unknown. But hear me, God does not take without purpose. He does not allow pain without redemption. If He has allowed someone to leave, trust that it is for your good. Maybe that relationship was limiting your growth. Maybe that friendship was keeping you from stepping fully into your calling. Maybe their presence was more of a distraction than a blessing. And so in His mercy, God removes them, not to harm you, but to heal you. You may not see it now, but one day you will look back and realize that the pain was not a punishment. It was a passageway. That what felt like an ending was actually a beginning. That what you thought was breaking you was in fact making you. So do not fear the fire. Do not fight what God is removing. Let Him do His refining work in you. Because when the fire passes, what remains will be stronger, purer, and more ready than ever for what God has in store. We don't always understand the way God moves. He closes doors we wanted to walk through. He removes people we thought would stay forever. He leads us down roads that don't make sense at the time. And if we're honest, sometimes we struggle to trust Him because we like control. We like to know what's coming next, to see the full picture, to understand every twist and turn before we take a step. And when life doesn't go according to our plan, when people leave that we thought would always be there, when everything shifts in ways we didn't expect, we feel lost. But hear me, just because you don't understand doesn't mean God isn't working. Just because you can't see the full picture doesn't mean His hand isn't guiding every stroke of the brush. He is not just the God of what you can see, He is the God of what you cannot. Think about a child walking with their father. The father leads them down a path, and at times the way seems strange. Maybe it's rocky, maybe it looks harder than the road they just left behind. And the child doesn't understand. Why are we going this way? Why did we leave the place that felt safe? But the father sees what the child cannot. He knows where the road leads. He knows what dangers lie in the places they are leaving behind. And so He doesn't explain everything. He simply says, trust me, keep walking. And so it is with God. He removes people. He shifts circumstances. He closes doors, not to harm you, but to guide you, not to take away, but to prepare. Because He sees what you cannot see. He hears the conversations you were never meant to hear. He knows the motives of hearts you never discerned. And in His love, He redirects you even when you do not understand. But so often we fight it. We try to force relationships that God has already ended. We try to go back to places He has called us out of. We spend so much time looking backward, mourning what we lost, that we fail to see the new thing God is doing right in front of us. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you're there right now, wondering why certain people have drifted away, why things didn't work out the way you planned, why God allowed the change. And maybe you're struggling to trust that His way is better, but let me tell you, if God removed it, you don't need it. If He closed the door, it wasn't meant for you. And if He led you away from someone, then no matter how much you think you needed them, they were not necessary for where He is taking you next. You do not have to understand everything to trust that God knows what He is doing. You just have to let go of what He is removing and take hold of what He is providing. Because when you trust Him, you will see that every loss was making room. Every closed door was protection. Every goodbye was grace. And every step forward is leading you exactly where you were meant to be. There will come a day when you look back and everything will make sense. The people who left, the doors that closed, the silence you once resented, the pain that seemed unbearable at the time. One day you will see it all with new eyes, and you will realize that God was never taking from you, He was leading you. But right now in this moment, you may still be in the middle of it. You may be standing in the space between what was and what will be. You may still feel the ache of loss, the confusion of unanswered questions, the weight of an uncertain future, and that is where faith must rise. That is where trust must be stronger than understanding. Because God is not finished with your story. He is not done shaping you, refining you, leading you. He is still at work, even in the places where it feels like nothing is happening. And every step, every shift, every loss, these things are not random. They are part of a greater design, one that you may not fully understand now, but one that will one day leave you in awe. Think of a tapestry. From the underside, it looks like a mess. Knots, loose threads, colors that seem out of place. But turn it over and the masterpiece is revealed. Every thread had a purpose, every stitch was intentional, and so it is with your life. For now you may only see the knots, the threads that seem tangled and frayed. You may only see the people who have walked away, the chapters that have closed, the unanswered questions but God sees the full picture. He sees the masterpiece He is weaving, the purpose behind every shift and every season. And when the time is right, He will turn it over and you will see it too. You will see why He removed the wrong people. You will see why He redirected your steps. You will see why He closed doors you thought should have been open. And you will no longer mourn what you lost. You will rejoice in what He was preparing all along. Because in the end, you will realize that He was never taking anything away from you. He was always making room for something greater. There comes a moment when you must decide, will you keep looking back at what was, or will you step forward into what God is preparing? Will you hold on to what is gone, or will you embrace what is coming? Because the truth is, you cannot receive what God has for you if your hands are still clinging to what He has removed. It is a hard thing to let go. We grow attached to people, to seasons, to the way things used to be. We build our lives around certain relationships, and when they are gone, it can feel like a part of us is missing. But hear me. God never asks you to let go of something without a purpose. If He removes a person, if He shifts your path, if He allows something to fade, it is because He is leading you somewhere greater. You were not meant to stay in the past. You were not meant to dwell on what has been lost. God is always moving forward, always leading His people towards something new. And the question is, will you follow? Will you trust that His plan is greater than your own? Think of Abraham. God told him to leave everything behind, his home, his family, everything familiar, and to go to a land that He would show him. Abraham didn't have all the details. He didn't know exactly where he was going, but he trusted and he moved forward. And because he was willing to let go, God led him into a promise far greater than anything he could have imagined. That same God is leading you. He is calling you forward. He is saying, do not hold on to what I have removed. Do not settle in a place I have called you out of. Trust me, walk with me. I have something better ahead. But you have to be willing to release what is no longer meant to stay. You have to be willing to close the chapter, to stop trying to revive what God has already ended, to turn your eyes toward what is ahead instead of what is behind. Some of you have been stuck in a season of mourning for too long. You have been waiting for people to come back who were never meant to stay. You have been hoping for things to return to the way they were instead of embracing the new thing God is doing. And tonight I want to tell you it's time to move forward. It's time to stop asking why they left and start trusting where God is taking you. It's time to stop looking back at what was and start walking toward what is to come, because there is a future ahead of you. There is purpose in front of you. There are new relationships, new opportunities, new blessings that God has already prepared, but you will never step into them if you are still holding on to what He has removed. So let go, trust His plan, move forward, because what is ahead of you is far greater than anything you have left behind.